Today I'm building the engine that's going to replace the stock motor that's in my 2002 right now. Let me run you through the recipe. So I have a 2-liter block, with the forged, fully counterbalanced crankshaft, obviously. We decked it. It's a 50 RA so that it'll work with an MLS head gasket. I'm running ARP studs on the mains, ARP studs for the head, stock rods that I balanced. They have coated bearings and then ARP bolts as well. I'm really excited about these. I got this set of forged pistons, and this is the ring package that I'm running. I got this windage tray here with special flappers because the oil likes to climb the side of the block in 2002s and other M10 powered vehicles because the engine is tilted over. Got a new oil pump, new gasket set, timing chain, sprockets, timing chain tensioner stuff, new water pump, made sure to machine the upper cover along with the head. I'm just going to be running the stock style rocker retention hardware with the springs and the circlip and stuff. I've got some IE heavy duty rocker arms, which I'm pretty excited about. They look pretty beefy compared to the stock ones. I'm running heavy duty valve springs as well from the same company. The rocker shafts have a special modification done to them. These actually are threaded and they have Allen plugs in them so that there's no way they could ever pop out. Stock cam cylinder head has also been finished at 50 RA or better. Stainless steel valves also from IE. I went +1 to 39 millimeters on the exhaust side just because I wanted more surface area. I don't know if that theory will prove to be any better or not. And then I ceramic coated the faces of these. The head is actually a 1.8 from a 1985 E30 318i, which is, at least from what I've heard, the best option for turbo motors. All the machine work is already done. I actually did it several years ago with Terry Tinney at Performance Motors. Super good dude. He was very generous teaching me how to do things. Here's the specifications and the measurements that we came up with. I have this rod bolt stretch gauge, which I'm really excited about. That's the method that ARP recommends for tightening their rod bolts, so I'm going to go ahead and follow it. And then this is something that I'm extremely excited about. You may have seen it in the background of several of my videos, but this is a tool that lets me do a lot of different things to M10 cylinder heads, and they're very, very rare, and I just stumbled across this one and I had to get it. So it has this cage here so that I can press down on all the rocker arms at once and change out cams super easy. And then I also have this part here which slides back and forth on the rail, and that makes it so that I can install valves. And this is just an all-around awesome tool, and I can't wait to use it to assemble this engine. So I'm way too excited about this new cylinder head tool to not do the head first. So I'm going to start with that. And first thing we need is some new stem seals. And I'm just using this socket to gently press them into place. Next, I'm going to make sure that all the valves and seats are nice and clean. There's no grit on them. Next, my special tool wood block goes here. Next, I'm going to install the lower spring retainers with just a little bit of oil. Next, I got a set of IE heavy-duty valve springs. I think these are actually from a different car. It should give me the seat pressure that I need. Alright, now it's time to install the top retainers and the keepers. Flip the head over again and do one last check to make sure that the valves are sealing correctly. I already lapped them and they should be good, but might as well double check. I got my chambers full of the good stuff, a little bit of 91. So I'm just going to give it maybe 20-30 minutes and make sure that I don't have any leakage. Everything looks good there, so I pulled the plugs back out. Now I'm going to take this block out of the way, and I'm going to go ahead and flip the cylinder head back onto the frame of the tool here, which I padded with a little bit of tape. Probably should have done that from the beginning, but that's okay. And then I'm going to start installing the rocker shafts and all of the hardware associated with it, including my new heavy-duty rocker arms. I'm going to go ahead and lube up a bunch of surfaces with this assembly grease, including the bores for the shafts to help them slide in easier, the cam journals as well. I'll also be putting some on the tips of the valve stems, as well as on the pads and bores of the rocker arms, thrust washers, and of course the cam once that goes in. So with the rocker arms, there's a couple things I got to do. So the side with this little notch in it faces forward because the cam thrust plate slides up and mates with that. I also need to make sure that all of these little divots are aligned so that my head bolts can go where they need to go. And then I also need to make sure that the open end of this rocker shaft faces backwards so that the oil pressure sensor gets oil flow. And then I need to make sure that my exhaust side rocker shaft has both the plugs in place like I talked about. These are the threaded ones, so there's no way they could ever pop out. But real quick before I put that stuff in, I'm just going to verify that the cam turns nicely. Alright, the cam feels pretty nice in there. So now I can pull it back out of my way. Alright, so the next part is a little bit tricky, installing all of the rocker stuff. So I'm going to start with the intake side. So like I was saying, the open end needs to face back here. And then the way that this is going to stack up is first there's going to be a spring, followed by a flat thrust washer, followed by the rocker, which sits like that obviously. And then this little collar goes next, and if I can get it to focus, and that little recess is going to face away from the rocker. And what that recess is for is to retain this little C-clip which goes around the shaft and locates everything. But you put that piece on last. So spring first, followed by washer, and then the rocker, and then this collar. So like I said, it's important to remember to align this kind of as you go, because it gets a little trickier to turn the rocker shaft as you go along. But that's another thing to keep in mind, is if you're at this point and the rocker shaft is really hard to push through the head, that means probably one of two things. Either your head is warped, which is bad, and it's probably going to be really hard to fix, or it may not even be repairable. And then the other issue is there might be some burrs in here or on the shaft itself, so you might have to address those. But this one's going in nice and smooth. Now I'm just double checking the alignment of the divots in the shaft to make sure that all of my head bolts, or head studs I should say, are going to go through cleanly, which they are. I'm going to go ahead and thread this one on. And now I'm going to go ahead and install the clips. So you can see how that little recess makes it so that that collar covers the entire thing. Now it's time for the exhaust side. So the exhaust side rocker is just a little bit tight, and what I'm doing to mitigate that is kind of a poor man's line hone here. So I'm taking an Allen key that's the same outside diameter as the inside diameter of this oil hole back here, and I'm using that as a little handle for twisting, and then I'm just taking a little bit of oil and I'm putting it in the ports where the rocker shaft slides, and then I'm just gently working it back and forth, just gently working it. I think it's really unlikely that this head is warped. So if I'm able to get this smooth just by doing this, then I think we're good to go. I think the main reason that it's a little bit tight is because these rocker shafts are actually from a different engine. They're not the ones that I prepped for this head to begin with. Just take a little bit of massaging. A lot smoother now. Just got to clean up the goo. Next thing I'm going to do is install the eccentrics so that they can push down on the valves when I put the special tool on here to compress it. Alright, so these bolts have a flat spot, which corresponds with a flat spot on the rocker, and then the eccentric gets installed like so, and then simply a washer and nut. When I adjust these, I use an Allen key in the little adjustment hole there, and when I have these installed, I want it so that when I pull down towards me on the Allen key, the eccentric is making the gap between it and the valve stem tighter. So when I pull down, I want that eccentric to be bigger, just like that. So I have all of the eccentrics as loose as they can be to get me as much clearance between the rocker pads and the cam. That way I don't have to push down as far on the valves to get the cam slid into place. And this is going to be interesting because I don't know if I can use this tool with a +1 millimeter on the exhaust side, but I think that there will be enough clearance, especially since this is just a stock camshaft. I don't know if this would work with a hotter cam, but I think that it should be fine. But that being said, I'm going to have to keep a close eye on the underside and make sure that I'm not smashing the valves into each other as I'm tightening down on the frame. So now what I'm going to do is look underneath and ensure that I have the clearance so that as the valves start to come together, as I tighten down, they're going to clear both the frame of this thing and each other. So that's what I'm going to have to be careful of. Hopefully this works out, otherwise I'm gonna have to do it the other way, which takes way longer. Bam. Woo! Let's go. Alright, so once I get to this point, I need to install my cam retention plate. And now this is a little bit tricky because it needs to go in a couple places. So it needs to go in this journal, in the cam, but then it also needs to go into the two little recesses in the ends of the rocker shafts. So I need my rocker shafts to move just a little bit towards the cam gear side. So I'm just gonna very gently tap on them using my aluminum dowel, and that should give me enough clearance that I can shove that cam retainer plate up where it needs to be. So I know that the cam retention plate is installed properly because of three things. It fits well into the channel in the camshaft itself, it fits behind the notch in both rocker shafts, and these two bolts fit into place. So these two are getting just a little bit of blue Loctite. And then they're getting torqued to 10 Newton meters, or about 7.5 foot-pounds. This tool is amazing. It is light years better than doing it the Sudoku challenge puzzle way, where you're trying to wrestle with 5 different things at once to make it all fit together. This just simplifies the process. But that's not to say that I can just kind of throw it all together and zip down on these with an air gun and it's all going to be fine. That's definitely not the case. This took some, a little bit of thought and some time to do it correctly. But the principles that I kept in mind is tightening these as evenly as I possibly could, and just watching at the 4 corners to see where the distance from the bottom of the frame to the top of the cylinder head was, because that's the goal, is to get to the bottom of this frame to touch the cylinder head. I actually had the whole thing on its side, and then I'd tighten, and then I'd check the clearances, and then I'd tighten some more. And hopefully this kind of illustrates how close they get to each other using this tool. And if you were to just zip this thing on and off, you could easily bend these valves. That's a good little tidbit, that I can go +1 millimeter on the exhaust side and still use the factory tool. Now if I were to go to +1 on the intake side and the exhaust side, I don't know. I don't know if there's enough room or not, but that is potentially something I'll explore in the future as I mess around with more M10s and build more heads and stuff. Alright, so obviously I'm just gonna check that the cam turns freely and it doesn't make any bad noises or bind or anything like that, which it doesn't. It feels silky smooth. So now the next thing I'm going to do, and pay this flange no mind. At some point somebody had a pipe wrench on it, but we don't worry about that. So now I'm going to go ahead and set this bad boy to top dead center. Where's that little mark at? Now the cam is at top dead center. So now I'm going to slowly loosen these with this whole apparatus on its side, and then I'll be watching the valves underneath and just ensure that it doesn't get away from me and that I prevent the valves from touching each other. But oh no, now this frame piece of the tool is stuck and I can't pull it out. But I think I know the solution. So since these are IE heavy duty rocker arms, I think that they're built a little bit different than the stock ones. Well, I know that they are. They may not have been designed with this tool in mind. So all I'm going to do now is just remove the eccentrics and their hardware from the valve sides of the rocker arms, and then that should give me enough room to finagle this thing back out, and we should be good. Wait a minute, why didn't I think of that earlier? That will help me out a lot if I pull the studs. Let me try that too. Should be a little less restricted that way. I like it, I like it. There we go. There we go. Alright, next the oil supply tube is going to go in. And I'm using new crush seals with this. And now the way that this stack up goes is there's a crush washer between the top of the banjo bolt and the top of the oil rail, and then there's also a crush washer on the bottom. Okay, so the listed torque felt excessive. I don't want to push it, so I just kind of did it by feel, and you can see crush washer on the bottom, pipe, crush washer on top, and then the hollow bolt, banjo bolt obviously, and that's how that goes together. So I don't really trust that torque spec. It feels not safe. Alright, now I'm going to throw the studs in. So I've seen these heads put together two ways. I've seen it where there's a support piece here and a support piece here, or if this piece is actually over here. So instead of debating on what reduces vibration and the potential to crack of the oil pipe the most, I'm just going to add another one. Now there's no reason to argue about it. Now it's time to install the distributor housing. And here's a couple important things to keep in mind. Here's the new gasket that's necessary. And then this is a tiny little special sealing washer. There's the part number for that piece. And this little guy goes on the smallest bolt. And I'll show you that in a sec. That little baby bolt with the special sealing washer that I mentioned, it goes right here. I forgot to mention that it's a good idea when you're doing the rebuild to verify that that tiny little hole in the bottom of the housing is open, because that needs to be able to allow oil to drain out of this. Otherwise it'll get backed up in here and you don't want that. So now I'm going to torque the 10mm heads to 8 foot-pounds and the 13mm head to 19.5 foot-pounds. So this is going to be as far as I want to get the cylinder head for now. I'm going to go ahead and bag it and set it off to the side and then get started on the bottom end.